2, 1, go!
Welcome to Access News, the Redwood Empire edition. I'm Ken Steely, and sitting here with me today is William French. Hello, William. How are you?
Hello there, Ken. I'm doing well. How are you?
Little handshake there. Doing well here. And today I wanted to talk to William about several subjects that he's familiar with. William, I believe that you're a hometown boy, born and raised here?
I am. I was born in Ukiah at the old General Hospital in Dora in 1974.
I noticed how he mentioned the old General Hospital.
Old General Hospital.
The old original General Hospital.
The original hospital, yes.
William is a local historian here in Ukiah, and that's one of the things that intrigues me about William. Although he's a man of many talents, many facets, and I want to talk about some of the other subjects that William's involved in besides history. But the history is what drew Alan and I together originally as friends, and that we share a common interest in.
You mean William?
Who did I
call me Alan.
I called you Alan. You know, and what was it, a few months ago I was calling you David, which is your middle name.
Which is my middle name, yeah.
So now I need to tell you I have a brother named David and a son named Alan. So how good of friends are we, you know? It reminds me, here again, it reminds me of the old TV commercial, you can call me Jay. But I don't have to call you by your real name. No. I'm sorry, William. Okay, so some of the things that I want to talk to you about is that I know, one of the things that I know you're very passionate about locally is mental health.
It is. I started when a friend of mine, when I grew up, her name was Carol Dunlap. And back in the late 90s, she was in an incident at the county jail. And she ended up accidentally hanging herself. She was afraid that she was tabbing it to where the CEOs would come and see her, but she ended up accidentally hanging herself. And I got really interested in mental health advocacy because she had been going through a mental health crisis and she wasn't being treated properly by the then county mental health department. So in 1999, I was invited to be on the what was then the mental health board. And over the next almost 8 years, I became one of the lead mental health advocates in Mendocino County. We ended up making a lot of changes at that time that was really important. We closed the then psychiatric health facility, the inpatient lock facility, because people were coming out of it really abused by staff and nurses. One person was beat up by a nurse, other people were being verbally assaulted, things being thrown at them. It was a really bad situation.
I remember reading about a lot of that in the Daily Journal, Ukiah Daily Journal at the time.
Exactly, and sadly a lot of people nowadays are forgetting it. They're saying, why did the PUF close? Why did it close? And I'm like, I have the newspaper articles.
Right.
And I'm like, and I write to Casey Meadows on a regular basis when people bring up, it never should have closed. And I'm like, but Casey, in your own words,
right,
this is why it closed. People were getting beat up by the staff and by nurses. But we replaced the PUF with a crisis service center that cut the number of hospitalizations in half. So it went from almost 200 hospitalizations to less than 100. We reduced the cost of hospitalizations from $1,000 a day in a hospital. We could treat people for about $250 a day in the community.
Well, what is currently being used for mental health?
Currently what's been being used by, it was a group called Ortner. They're now not part of the process. Now it's this Redwood Community Service, whatever it's called, is now part of it. They're taking over from Ortner. Ortner increased hospitalizations from 194 a year to over 400 a year, because Ortner owned their own hospital in Yuba County.
I see.
Or in Sutter County. And so they would ship people from Ukiah, from Mendocino County to Sutter County. Okay. Because they own their own facility. So they more than double hospitalizations. And that was not what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to lower hospitalizations.
Right.
And now what's going on with mental health, I'm not exactly sure, because this new organization that's only been working with children is now taking over adult services, but they have no history with adult services. And they're not working with people, with anyone that was part of what happened 15 years ago when adult services was actually working and was successful.
So the reason I ask is if you knew what currently was working with mental health, is it doesn't seem to be working, in my opinion, and many others have shared that same opinion.
Exactly. That's what I've been reading from Sonia Nesh, who's one of the members of the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, who I worked with closely 15 years ago to get the Crisis Services Center open and things like that. It is a disaster. The Board of Supervisors haven't been listening to people. The county administrators haven't been listening to anybody. And nothing's working.
So have you read Tom Allman's plan?
I did. I think what worries me about that is it's still going to be operated by the county, And the problem with any mental health services being operated by the county is it gets you stuck under the civil service employees, which means it's nearly impossible to fire someone.
I see.
One of the reasons we closed the PUF is we couldn't fire this one employee who was the one that beat up the person in the locked room.
I see.
She was the one that was yelling at people and throwing things at people. She had been there 14 years, but there was no direct evidence that she was harming people, even though everybody said she was. Even though all of her coworkers said she was. We knew she was. Reports came out from the state, from a group called Protection and Advocacy, which has a different name now. The Mental Health Board did a report, and the grand jury did a report. And the incidents that she was involved in were reported and commented on by each of these reports. But because there was no direct evidence, we're talking video footage specifically, of her doing any of these things, she couldn't be fired.
So did they not have video cameras back then?
She turned them off.
Oh, she was allowed to do that?
She turned them off. When the guy was beat up, his wife was actually on the mental health board at the time. The camera went off, and the camera went back on. And by the time the camera was off and on, he got beat up.
Well, a lot of people are afraid things like that are going to be happening. You know how you've probably heard and read about how many police forces now across our nation are getting the body cams.
Yes.
And that, of course, this is a brand new world. Who knows how they're actually going to be working? But one of the faults of the body cam is they can be turned off at will.
That's what happened in Chicago. They found just within the past 4 months. In Chicago, they found the officers, more than 70% of the officers, actually were fooling around with the cameras.
Yeah.
They were unplugging the audio, even the cameras in their cars, unplugging the audio, turning off the cameras. It was maybe 4 months ago, and it was this huge scandal. But then it went away when other stuff started happening, and people just forgot about it.
I see.
But it was this huge thing in Chicago that so many officers were fooling around with the cameras.
Okay. Well, another subject I'd like to talk to you about, and I also know you're very passionate about this as well, is the current condition and a little bit of the history of the Palace Hotel.
Well, the Palace, people that know me and that have followed me for all these years knows that I started writing about the Palace Hotel back in the early 90s. It closed in 80, I believe 88. The current owner bought it, I think, in 90 or 91. She's allowed it to deteriorate, really, to where it is now, because she's done almost nothing to it. The work that was done to it pretty much gutted a lot of it, did not follow historic preservation standards, even though it's on the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the National Register of Historic Preservation. It did not follow guidelines, so a lot of it was gutted without guidelines, without permits, without the things that it really needed to happen legally under California law, under preservation law and preservation standards. What the interior looks like now, only the city knows. Only maybe a handful of people at the city know what it really looks like, what's left of the historic fabric of the interior. But I've been writing letters for 20 years now, more than 20 years, about the Palace Hotel. Actually, I have copies of, I've been finding them lately. Of most of those.
I've read many of your writings.
What concerns me, though, is that it continues to go on. And the city allows it, they're fighting it, but I don't think they've ever fought really hard for it. I think the fact that the city has the same attorney that they've had for 25 whatever years, to me, I think now is showing that this may be a little bit of a problem now.
I've noticed it seems like the city of Ukiah is stuck in limbo with the Palace Hotel. It's like 2 steps forwards and 4 steps back. Yeah. It's like, you know.
It might be time for the city to bring in a new attorney to take over and fight the new fight, because when you have the same person fighting the same fight for 20 plus years, but that's really what's going on. You have the same attorney fighting the same fight for 20 plus years. It might be time for a new attorney to come in and step up and try to do something different.
How old does a building have to be before it can be listed for historic preservation?
50 years.
50. And does it have any effect if the building is in the county versus the city?
No. So on the National Register and State Register, it does not have an effect. Okay. You have to get permission from the it's a long process. You have to get permission from the property owner. For the state registry, I'm not sure about national. The city of Ukiah has a historic resource list that hasn't been updated since the 1990s. You and I, this past year, we've been looking at that.
Right.
But there's no teeth behind that historic resource list. Buildings have been modified that really should not have been modified because they were on the historic resource list. But it has to be 50 years old. It has to meet certain criteria for architecture, cultural or historic significance. But there is no teeth behind actually preserving these buildings. It just makes the process longer if you go to tear it down or try to change it. It just makes the process longer, but it doesn't stop them from actually being torn down or modified.
So since it makes the process longer if they wanted to tear it down, could that be a reason why some property owners are hesitant to get their buildings registered?
It's part of the it is part of the process. I think a lot of people in Ukiah do not know that their buildings might be eligible. I think the city of Ukiah has partly to do with that because it hasn't updated its historic resource list, but that's something that I've been working on for a while now, and I know both you and I have been talking about that for a while with one other person. I think it's, firstly updating the list that the city has now, trying to get that up to date, because there's been some changes to buildings that really should not have taken place as quickly as they took place. Should have been more of a review. Sadly, since we lost Judy Pruden, some changes have taken place in buildings that really she would have fought against,
right,
and would have been able to, prevent, I think, if she had still been with us. But no, I think it's people not understanding what it means. They think, oh, well, I can't do anything to the building if it's registered, but that's not true. They think, oh, it affects the entire building, but no, it doesn't affect the interior. It affects maybe the exterior, only interior, only if it's specifically designated for a specific room or interior of a building. It's a complicated process, but it's not as complicated. Once you understand it, it's not as complicated as it initially seems.
I know I won't say which building in particular, but there's a beautiful downtown building that was updated here in the last couple of years, and little things like the building's owner wanted to put in energy efficient windows. They were prevented from doing that because of the historic preservation, and things like that. It's like, I believe in historically preserving a building, but little things like energy efficient windows, I see that as a plus.
That depends. Truly, that comes down to the understanding of the people at the city, understanding what's allowed, understanding construction techniques.
Well, I understand this is state,
but understanding what can be done as well. At the state level, I do not believe I think if someone says it was a state thing, I think they might have misunderstood, or the city might have misguided them, because if you design your new energy efficient windows to look like the original historic windows,
I see,
and maybe even use the historic windows as the exterior with the new energy efficient inside, then that is legally allowed. Then that is allowed if it's if it is a registered historic building. But the thing is, Ukiah only has less than a handful of historically registered buildings. I believe we have 2 or 3. So the state would only ever get involved. I think we have 2 actually.
Okay.
We have Vichy Springs and we have the Sun House. There's no other registered historic building in Ukiah. Well, the Palace Hotel is on the National Register, but not on the state.
I don't want to mention which building it is because I don't want to offend the property owner, because I'm not sure that they want me to talk about their building. But it wasn't any of those buildings. But it was another building that is well over 50 years old.
It also comes down to choice of materials. There's a lot of decisions that go into it.
Right.
But I think a major problem that I've seen, and it goes back to the Palace Hotel, is the city not guiding people properly on what fits historically. The National Trust for Historic Preservation has a lot of information available, brochures and books and things about windows, doors, awnings, siding. So it's all laid out there what the internationally recognized practices are for historic preservation, for windows and doors, for all of these things. They're easy to follow. Manufacturers know what they are. It's really easy to follow. But the city has not been guiding people to these resources, to these companies that do these things that are not that expensive. And I've seen I've seen a lack of leadership, especially with the Palace, on these issues.
One more item about the Palace, and the way I want to move to the next subject, is with the Palace, what some people may not know is that in the 1980s, when the Palace was remodeled, it was remodeled cosmetically and not structurally.
Yes, that was a big problem because it had been added onto twice in 1914 and 1928 or 29.
Okay.
And they took out 2 of the walls of the original building and attached themselves to the floors. But they didn't build enough supports because it's so long ago they didn't understand supports and structures and things like that.
Right.
And so over the years, the structure started sinking a bit. It's not as bad as people were saying it was. The city did a study in the early 2000s, and I was I was sat in on the meetings and things like that for that. And they found that the building was not nearly as structurally bad, unsound as people were saying it was. It wasn't an immediate collapse. It wasn't in danger or anything like that from collapse unless there was a major earthquake. And Ukiah is not prone to having major earthquakes. We're
Right.
a small earthquake area. The problem, though, that arose, and I had brought this up to the city in 2003, was that the front wall, the bottom floor, is actually standing on 5 or 6 cast iron poles. That's solid wall you see.
You could see those during the last remodel.
last remodel.
They stripped out some of the bricks,
But from
you could see those
2003 to
poles.
now, everyone said, "Oh no, it would have been replaced by a solid wall."
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there because I knew someone who did some remodeling. He said, my friend said, "No, there's poles."
Right.
Because that solid wall is not a solid wall. It's not holding anything up.
Right.
So the city didn't even recognize the poles were there until last year, or the year before.
Right, because the poles were exposed.
Exactly.
Finally.
And that throws up a huge retrofitting issue.
Right.
That adds,
Right.
another $1 million to the retrofitting cost of the building. But still, the cost of demolishing the building is the same as rehabbing the building.
Something I would like to see done with the Palace Hotel, and this is just my personal idea, is to turn the Palace Hotel into a parking garage with the facade looking like the Palace. So we would still have a building that looked like the Palace, but it's actually a parking garage. And I've seen other buildings done this way, and I was amazed that they can do things like this these days.
Well, I can see the 1920s edition and maybe the 1914 edition done. I'd love to see the original structure, the 1891 building, restored. I think that condos would be a good, more like middle class, upper class condos downtown. People living downtown will help the economy downtown. More people with money living downtown. I think the Palace Hotel offers an immediate fix for that, a closer fix to that than building brand new construction, since a lot of it's still there. Parking's the issue, though.
Right. That's
Parking
why I
is a
would
big
like to see
problem.
it turned into a parking
Yeah,
garage.
and part of it could easily be turned into a parking garage.
And
And then some of the stuff we're using for parking now, you could build new housing on.
exactly. That's where I would
Yeah.
like to see done. Build the housing in some of the city parking lots. Turn the Palace into a beautiful parking garage with a facade that looks like the Palace. So we would still have the memory of the Palace, but we would have a building that is more workable economically for downtown.
Because a building that size is not workable. And the problem with condos for the entire building is there's still not going to be any parking.
Right.
So I can see a hybrid. I can see a hybrid of that.
So our next subject I'd like to go to here is the State Street Diet Plan, which I am not a fan of. I know that you're not a fan of. However, I know that several city officials believe very strongly, and I respect their ideas for why they believe strongly that way. However, I have very strong ideas and reasons why I don't see the State Street Diet Plan being successful. What would you like to add to that?
I think that if State Street was not our only thoroughfare, I could see it working. But State Street is the only thoroughfare in Ukiah other than the freeway.
So I think, with you saying that, I think putting State Street on a diet, and explain what that means.
That means turning State Street into one lane in each direction with a middle turn lane. And the original plan was for parking to be diagonal, like it is on School Street. And what that means is to pull out of your parking space, you'd actually have to pull into State Street, into the
back end of traffic.
Back into traffic, which will make traffic even worse.
Right.
But then but what they're taking is that sometimes nowadays you'll have, up to like 10 cars in 2 lanes headed south at, say, the Perkins Street stoplight. Maybe 2 will be turning left on the Perkins. But they're going to take those 10 cars and shove them into 1 lane. So now the backup's going to be like San Francisco.
Right.
And I'm moving back to Ukiah now, and I've lived in San Francisco for 9 years. I know what that's like.
So,
and part of the problem is when the city studied other communities, they studied Palo Alto. They studied wealthy neighbor cities.
there was a city in Texas.
Exactly. They studied wealthy cities that had more than one thoroughfare.
Right.
They didn't study any city that had anything comparable to Ukiah.
Well, and also we need to add that this diet plan, I believe, starts and I may be off by a block or two, and if you know where it starts and ends, please correct me. I believe it starts at Henry or Scott. It could be Scott or Henry. I'm a little fuzzy. I should have did my homework on this one, and then I believe it ends at about Clay Street. So it's only the real heart, the real small section of downtown Ukiah. You're going to squeeze cars into one lane and then open it back up after a few blocks.
And the city, people believe, oh, it's going to help business downtown, which is not going to do. You know, right now, part of the reason people are not shopping along State Street is, I was driving down the other day, I realized because of the trees, I don't know what businesses are on State Street.
It's
no
hard
clue. I have no clue.
It's hard to see the signs, and part of that issue is the city's sign ordinance, which was developed back in the 1980s. It's totally unworkable for a positive business to get their signage out there.
And it was updated in the mid-2000s to make it even more, what I would say, draconian, and make it even, one business, Rainbow Construction, went out of business, partly because of the sign ordinance, because the city went after them because they put flags on their building.
I remember.
And the city council members went after them. I think the city, part of the problem with the State Street Diet Plan is it's already been approved by a previous city council. So by the time this city council took over, it was too late. Or it was too late for them to do anything. But the thing is,
it could still be stopped.
The citizens could come together right now, the citizens of Ukiah, which neither of us are, which is part of the issue, but they could come together and get an initiative on the ballot to stop this. That's the grassroots thing citizens of Ukiah could do. They could get initiative on the ballot to stop this. But so far, I don't think people know either how to do it, or no one's been talking about that, or whatever. But
I read recently in the Ukiah Daily Journal that I believe it was a city official who said that this isn't the 1950s. We don't need a highway running through our town anymore. Meaning, she was referring back to when Highway 101 used to be the main thoroughfare that ran through Ukiah, which is now State Street, north and south. What that person, the statement is not correct, because what they didn't realize is that prior to, and you correct me if I'm wrong on the dates here, I believe about, what was it, the early 50s? State Street was, the entire State Street was one lane in each direction. It was part of the plan to decommission Highway 101 through Ukiah, was to give Ukiah a 4-lane roadway and decommission the highway because they built the freeway bypass. It was part of a 10, 15, or 20-year plan. It tied into the building of Coyote Dam at Lake Mendocino, rerouting Highway 20, and changing State Street into 4 lanes was part of that plan. And now the city, the people that are here now, I don't know if they just because they weren't born and raised here or because they haven't studied the history of Ukiah, it seems that they want to change that. And
the plan for State Street and the freeway and all that dates back to the late 40s, early 50s. Some of it is still in the works. Believe it or not, an exit for Brush Street off of 101 is in the plans from the 50s.
Right.
And it's still in the works.
Yeah.
It's still in the planning stages.
Which is ironic because today we don't actually necessarily at this point in our lives need a freeway exit at Brush Street. We actually need the freeway exit just south of Walmart. That's part of the problem. That's part of the traffic congestion on Airport Park Boulevard. If there was another on and off ramp at the south end of Airport Park Boulevard, you would alleviate a lot of the traffic getting off at Talmadge Road.
Yeah, I think one of the problems we have with downtown and with Ukiah right now is people keep referring to Ukiah as a small town. Ukiah has not been a small town. I'm 41 years old. It has not been a small town in my entire lifetime. The city of Ukiah itself and the city limits has over 16,000 people. In Ukiah area has almost 30,000 people.
Right.
On any given day, business day, this was 10 years ago, on a given business day, within the city limits, there's 40,000 people working within the city limits. That does not make a small town. This is a small city. When the 4 lanes were put in the early 50s, 52 to 54, I believe one of the bridges has on it, we're talking there were maybe 8,000 people. So when people are putting out numbers, oh, this isn't the 50s. Like, you're right, this isn't the 50s. You now have 40,000 people within the city limits every Monday through Friday.
Right.
And we have 1 thoroughfare.
So it seems like the city of Ukiah officials, the ones who support this plan, want to take us back in time to the pre-1950s, where State Street was one lane in each direction.
Well, I think years ago, Charlie Stump, who's the planning director for the city, presented to me an idea that I loved, and it was to take Main Street at Ukiah Shopping Center, cut through Ukiah Shopping Center, and have Main Street be the northbound lanes,
Well.
two lanes in each direction, and State Street be the southbound lanes, and then at Norton go back to being where State Street is. They did that in Eureka, and
Right.
it works great. Why they abandoned that plan, I do not understand.
I found an article, because I've heard you mention that before.
Yeah.
I found an article in the Ukiah Daily Journal that actually talked about doing that. That was the plan of the 50s also, was to take Main Street all the way to Talmadge Road. And of course, later, I think in about the 80s, Main Street did get extended to Gobi, but they decided not to extend it anymore. And I'm also of the belief, and it's too late now without a lot of expense, that Orchard Avenue should have been extended to Talmadge as well.
Yes.
The more roads that connect to other thoroughfares, the more options drivers have, so you don't get these bottlenecks in town.
Yes.
And of course, the people go to college to study traffic, and why they don't see this is beyond
Well,
me.
part of the problem also is, no matter, I was on the Housing Elements Update Committee back in the mid-2000s, and they have to do it every 5 years. And we had all these plans laid out, all these ideas. And so the city adopted it. It was great, just like the general plan, master plan, all of that. But the city itself, instead of going on that and basing planning decisions on that, they ignore all of that and still base their planning property by property. That's what happened with Orchard. Is instead of saying, okay, we're going to extend Orchard to Airport Park Boulevard, which was in the plans, they then approved housing right in the way of where it would be extended.
Exactly.
Because they looked at it property by property and not going back to the master plan and saying, oh, wait a minute, we can't do that.
Right.
Which is what they should have done. They should have said, oh, wait a minute, we're going to put the road through here. Let's not build $1 million apartment complex.
Now, I just
in the way.
and I have to bring this up just for humor's sake. There was which I don't think this really affected traffic much in Ukiah, but there was a case of a road being built first, Hospital Drive, where it connected to Orchard, and then Kmart comes along, and we want to build a store right in the middle of your brand new street. I think Hospital Drive was about 5 years old at that time, and it was a little used street at the time.
Yeah.
So, but they allowed Kmart to build right in the middle and cut off Hospital Drive, connecting with Orchard, and that is, of course, today is the Home Depot store. Now, a positive for that is Kmart paid a good chunk of money to have the I believe it's called, you correct me if I'm wrong, the Jason R. Buzzard Memorial Bridge there on North Orchard. Did I get it right?
Something like
I
that,
hope so, and my apologies to
Yes, I went to school, yes.
my apologies to the family if I got the name wrong.
A war veteran, yes, I went to school with him.
And another ironic thing about, by the time the bridge was built, Kmart had already left Ukiah.
Yes.
It took the city of Ukiah that long. And don't get me wrong, I love living here in Ukiah. I was born and raised here, and I respect many of our city officials. I don't always agree with some of their ideas, their plans, and some of their actions, which that's what local government is all about. So, some of the people are my friends that I don't agree with, but just like you and I, you and I don't always agree, but we're still friends.
Exactly.
Right. So, in case any of the city officials are watching, I respect you. I like you. I don't always like your ideas. But
Exactly.
if you're going to be in politics, that's what's going to happen.
Yes.
Sometimes you have to have thick skin. Okay, another subject, moving on here, is the Main Street program. You want to talk about the preservation?
Yes, I've been following the Ukiah, really big into historic preservation. The Main Street program, Ukiah has a Main Street program, it's been around since the early 90s, I believe. And it was started, the Main Street programs nationally were started by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And part of their goal was to help communities rebound from economic issues by helping restore and preserve their historic architecture, their history, their downtowns, all of that. And across the country, thousands of communities have prospered economically because of this, because they've adopted historic preservation ordinances, they've built historic preservation committees. They've worked really hard to bring their communities back to what they were, back in the heyday when their economies were booming. Ukiah Main Street program sadly does not do this. in more than 20 years, I have yet to see the Ukiah Main Street program get behind the restoration or preservation of any building downtown. When I was on the design review board for the city of Ukiah, they actually supported the modernization of some of our historic buildings. You know, this is a group that supported the stuccoing over of the Marx building where Ritual Restaurant is now, instead of its restoration, even though the restoration money could have been easily made available because it is a historic building. And it is such an important building in town. A grant could have been found to restore the building to its original, glory, because it was a beautiful building. They didn't do this. Instead, they said, oh yeah, let's stucco it up and make it this bland, gray kind of what it is today. They haven't stood up to try to help preserve the Palace Hotel, the facade, to try to help fix it up in 25 whatever years. They haven't stood up, try to get that building addressed, even though it has a significant impact on their members and their members' business. They haven't tried to help get the building where, it's called the Rudy Building, where Photo Finish and Ukiah Trophies is. They haven't even tried just to get it painted.
I agree. The Rudy Building, to me, is one of the most obvious eyesores. As you drive on State Street downtown, kitty corner from the courthouse, or right across the street on State Street from the courthouse, it looks like to me, and I could be wrong on the materials, but it looks like in the 1960s somebody put Formica on the outside of the brick building.
That's pretty much what they did. And it's plaster. They could take it off, and the plaster should still be there, or at least part of it. But paint. The city of Ukiah, at one point, did offer them money to redo it. The owners refused. The family refused. He was an older gentleman at the time. Yeah. This was 15, 16 years ago. But sadly, the Main Street program, in my opinion, has not stepped up to the plate when it comes to restoring and preserving downtown. What they are doing, though, is they're pushing for the State Street Diet Plan. They're pushing for the Streetscape Plan, which is going to make downtown Ukiah look like any pedestrian mall in the country. The light fixtures they're choosing, the paving they're choosing, everything is going to look like you just walked into Disneyland.
And I want to make...
it's not going to be historic. It's not going to be significant to Ukiah's history. In my opinion, they're putting the cart before the horse. They're not focusing on what we have and fixing the resources we have and restoring them. I mean, Ken, you've seen some of the beautiful buildings, photos of what some of these buildings used to look like.
Right.
And some of them were quite beautiful. And nowadays they're just horrible.
Right.
I don't even know what the right word
Well,
to
that's
describe
one of the
it.
things I'm afraid of our new courthouse when I haven't seen any plan what they propose, but I'm afraid that our new building is going to be very bland because that seems to be what they build for buildings today. And just so we're clear, I'm not real happy with the addition that they did in the 1950s
50s.
for the front part of the courthouse either. So,
Yeah.
but it still looks better than I'm sure than what the new building they're going to
Better
build.
than Eureka's is horrible.
And just like our new post office, it looks like a shoebox.
Yeah.
And
that's what's being built.
A shoebox with a couple doors in the front, and oh, by the way, like it or not, here's your new post office. And we have a beautiful post office building downtown that's not being used.
In San Francisco, of the couple hundred buildings they've built over the past 5 years, they all look the same.
Right.
And
also, I want to add that I could support the State Street Diet Plan, as you said, if there were at least one other main thoroughfare through town.
Exactly.
We don't have that. What's going to happen? It's going to chase people onto Main Street, onto Oak Street, which is residential, a little bit on School, but none of those streets go through a significant portion of town to help alleviate the traffic.
One of the arguments people that support the diet plan make, and I do understand this argument, is that you can get places faster on the freeway, but it depends on where you're going.
Exactly.
I mean, I can literally get, some people will not like this, I can get from Gobi to Lake Mendocino Drive in 3 minutes on the freeway. But it takes me from my mom's house to get to the Gobi Street exit 6 minutes.
Right. Well, here's the thing that I don't think the city officials are seeing, and I know this from living in Ukiah, just living life, is I run my daily errands Monday through Friday. I start, because I live on the north end, just out the city limits. So I take the freeway down to the south end of Ukiah and make my stops. And I make my stops all through Ukiah, including downtown, wherever I need to go. I'm afraid that with the State Street Diet Plan, that's going to severely hamper my being able to get around and to stop at some of these businesses. So ultimately, and I know this is not what merchants want to hear, it ultimately chases me to the internet to buy stuff. And I try as much as I can to buy stuff downtown, to buy stuff at local merchants. But I'll be honest with you, if I cannot easily get to their brick and mortar building, I'm going to go right to the internet and have it brought to me.
I think part of the problem also, I think because the businesses I don't think are thinking about this either. There are so many stores downtown that the people of Ukiah, the 16,000 people within the city limits and the 20 whatever thousand people around, either don't need or don't want. It doesn't fit what the majority of people really need. Prices are too high, which of course they're going to be in a local business because they can't afford to buy stuff like big stores can. You don't know where the businesses are downtown because you can't see them because of the trees. Trees are beautiful. I remember when they were put in, we had this conversation, people had this conversation with them back then, how are you going to see my business?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, they even put trees in front of the marquee of the movie theater. So you can't even see the marquee of the movie theater because they put trees in front of it.
Right.
That was a long conversation I had with Charlie Stump back then. It's like, who made this really stupid decision to do this? But I think, you know, we're having this issue, and people, I don't think the people downtown, the merchants and the Main Street program are really understanding. I don't think they're really reaching out to the average person in Ukiah. They're not reaching out to a lot of people and asking, what are we missing? What aren't we getting about what's going on in Ukiah? I think the city's in that same position. They're not understanding what's going on in Ukiah either. They're just so isolated. They've isolated themselves so much among themselves. They're missing what 20,000 people really have to say.
So what our city officials, when they say, we'll take the freeway, they're not realizing that in the real world, I am taking the freeway to the south part of Ukiah, and I'm using State Street to do my shopping. And if I can't get through on State Street, I will not be doing my shopping there. I need to get through in a timely manner. And I'm not talking about running a race, because we definitely do need to slow down some of our rice racers, as the young folks call them, especially later in the evening when the traffic is light. I've seen people just speed through town at 50, 60 miles an hour, which is a 25-mile-an-hour zone. And it was something, and this is just personal opinion, I haven't seen the level of traffic enforcement from our Ukiah City PD that I remember growing up. So I don't know if that's because of lack of staff now or what the problem is. It is a revenue getter for the city, of course, getting those fees and fines from the tickets the police officers would write. But I think we just need more traffic enforcement on State Street. And of course, I realize that I may make a mistake and get caught up in that. But I truly believe that is the solution to slowing traffic down on State Street, is getting better police enforcement.
I think part of that, sadly, part of that goes back to the mental health issue, transients, because nowadays, when they go out on a call, you have to have 2 or 3 officers now respond. You can't just have one officer like they used to be able to.
Well, the officers used to sit there with radar, and trust me, I would get nailed once in a while, but I still support that.
Exactly.
We need the officers out there with the radar units.
And there's other options that the city can look at. Raise sidewalks, that raise the crosswalks an inch and a half. So it's almost like a speed bump as you go over the crosswalk. A lot of cities are doing that now. Concrete dividers down the middle so the 2 lanes are separated so you can't automatically turn left, so you have to go around the block. Those work in a lot of cities.
Have you seen the repaving that's going on North State Street right now?
I have.
Including the crosswalk I just read in the newspaper yesterday that is completed.
Yes.
They moved the crosswalk from the fairgrounds. The problem is there's a significant bump there. The crosswalk is not level. It's like it goes down. It's not raised. It's down. It's like it's a sunken crosswalk. So as you go across it, your vehicle does this. The new surface they're putting on State Street, and I thought it was a temporary surface because it's so rough. They're striping it today as we speak. Right now, there's stripers in the parking lot. Want to go fishing? No, there's striping being done on State Street.
Yeah. Well,
and it's a rough surface.
Well, the mistake they're making on State Street, and it's a serious mistake, is we were talking about the freeway, when freeway went to Ukiah. When the freeway went to Ukiah in the early 1950s, it was concrete. From Talmadge up to, I don't know where.
And a lot of our city officials have forgotten that.
But it was almost a ford, concrete the whole way. And the concrete's still there. When they just dug a sewer line, whatever it was, from Low Gap north, they actually had to dig in the concrete to dig, they cut 4 inches down.
Right.
To do whatever they did.
Which made the project cost more because it wasn't written into the original plan, because either our city officials weren't born and raised here and didn't live here to know that information, they could have asked you and I, why aren't they calling us for
the reason?
For consults?
If you take State Street, this is funny. If you take State Street from from Smith south, the reason it's so bumpy, and it's a uniform bump. Every so many feet, there's a bump.
It's a section of concrete.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the expansion joints where the asphalt is cracked because of the concrete.
Right.
I figured that when I was 14 years old.
But they've sanded that down. They had a big machine brought in a few years ago.
That was north of Smith.
Oh, okay.
From Smith south is asphalt on top of concrete.
Okay.
Just like from Low Gap north.
They did grind a few years ago, 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
They did grind down a significant.
From Smith to Low Gap.
Okay, well, real quickly, because we're about to run out of time, I know you wanted to talk about LGBT issues.
I think one thing that's really exciting that's happening in Ukiah, Mendocino County actually has an extremely large LGBT community. It's something a lot of people in Ukiah have never really grasped or understood, that the hills are alive.
With the sound of music.
Seriously, it's a higher per capita rate in Mendocino County than there is in San Francisco or anywhere else in the country. Mendocino County has a larger per capita rate of gay and lesbian and transgender individuals than anywhere else in the country. And I think that's something a lot of people do not either realize or understand. And I think what's great is I was driving down State Street a couple weeks ago, and it was right after the Orlando shootings. And they had a gathering in Alex R. Thomas Plaza. And it felt, to me, for the first time, I saw a drag queen crossing the street. Not going to a show, not going to a theater production or anything like that, but just crossing the street to go to this gathering. And to me, that felt so empowering, so uplifting, because I was part of the very first gay and lesbian group in Mendocino County back in 1993, so many years ago. That was important then, but to see people coming together and know that groups like Potter Valley, the school district out there has a Gay Straight Alliance, to know that groups like the high school here has one, and that so many things have changed in Ukiah and that people are now starting to come out and feel comfortable to talk about it and be open, I think, is a great thing.
So I just want to add on that, it's in our events calendar that there's a Ukiah Pride March, which is happening on July 24th. That's a Saturday, and it's in Ukiah starting, trying to find the information here. It may not say. There it is. It starts on the corner of Scott and North State Street, and it ends at Alex Thomas Plaza. It starts at 11 a.m., and it should be over with by 11:30.
Yeah, on Sunday the 24th.
Sunday the 24th. Yes, it does say Sunday, doesn't it?
They have a documentary showing on Saturday the 23rd at Slam Dunk.
At Slam Dunk Pizza, that's at 5:30 p.m. on the Saturday the 23rd. And then later that evening, there is a dance at the Ukiah Bowling Alley at 9 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I thank you, William, for coming in today.
No
I did
problem.
call you by your correct name
Yes,
that time.
you did.
And I apologize for those times when I refer to you by a different name. Growing up, some of the adults used to do that to me all the time, and I couldn't figure out why they were doing that. Now I'm an adult, and I still can't figure out why I'm doing it now.
At least you didn't call me Michael. A lot of people call me Michael for some strange reason.
Well, I don't know why. Now that you've mentioned it, I'll probably do that next time. All right. Well, thank you, William.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. We hope you've enjoyed this issue of our Redwood Empire News section. If you have comments or would like to let us know about some things that you would like us to talk about here on our program, we'd sure love to hear your comments. You can go to facebook.com/Mendocino Access TV. You can give us a call at 707-462-1407 or write us a letter and address it to 171 Brush Street, Suite E, Ukiah, California 95482. Once again, I'm Ken Steely, and sitting here was William French.
Yes.
Got it. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to Access TV, the Redwood Empire edition. I'm Ken Steely here with your local events coming up. One of the big things happening the very first week in August, of course, is the Redwood Empire Fair. It's happening August 4th through the 7th, and the fair will open this year August 4th, which is a Thursday, approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Thursday is always a limited day. It's the opening day, and they want to make sure that all the animals are ready, the carnival is ready, the exhibits are ready, so that's why it doesn't quite open as early as the other days. But on the other days, of course, the fair runs from noon to midnight. I think they stop letting people in about 10 o'clock at night, I think, is about the approximate times. But you want to look forward to that. I know I'm looking forward to that. It's Butler Amusements, of course, will be there. You can get your Carnival pre-sale tickets at several different places in and around Ukiah. They're available at Rayleigh's, Ukiah's Taco Bell, Chavez Market, Creative Workshop, Ukiah Grocery Outlet, J.D. Red House in Willits, Geiger's and Long Valley Market in Laytonville, and the fair office. There'll be all kinds of motorsports action happening at the racetrack, and it looks like they're having side-by-sides, ATVs. On Thursday, Friday will be the Mud Bogs, and Saturday is the Truck and Tractor Pulls. Sunday is the Dirt Nationals, jalopies, and boat races. And don't forget the live entertainment happening on the Willow Tree stage. That's the Thurston Motors Willow Tree stage. Thursday, Funkacillin. Friday, Wayland and the Wildcats. Saturday, Too Big. All three big local headlining bands. And then Sunday is our Spanish music day with Banda Pacifica, La Integra de Mendo, and Kashan 2. And I apologize if I mispronounced those, the names of the Spanish bands. So you can go to, on Facebook, go to Redwood Empire Fair, and you can see a copy of the poster and get more information. Okay, and another event's coming up, of course, is Sundays in the Park, which is well, what are we on, the 20-something year of that? It happens all through the summertime, and our next show will be July 24th. The entertainer will be Marcia Ball, and it says here that her style is a Texas boogie woogie living legend. So the concerts in the park, of course, happen on Sunday. The next one is July 24th, starting at 6 p.m. And if you bring chairs, make sure that they're low back chairs so everybody can see. And there's plenty of food and drinks and to be sold by the vendors there. They'll keep you going. All right, another event coming up we have, of course, is Ukiah Pride March is happening on Saturday, July 23rd. There will be at 5:30 p.m. at Slam Dunk Pizza. There'll be a pre-party that's happening Saturday the 23rd at 5:30 p.m. with a live DJ dance that evening at the Ukiah Bowl starting at 9. The actual Pride March, the parade, will happen on Sunday, the July 24th, starting at the corner of Scott and North State Street at 11 a.m., and it should all be over by 11:30 a.m., ending at Alex Thomas Plaza. And in the plaza, there'll be numerous vendors set up with their little pop-up tents and selling their goods and wares, so be sure and check that out. And we also have coming up the Show and Shine Car Show, which is happening at downtown Ukiah. It's at the end of summer. It's called the End of Summer Show and Shine Classic Car Show, and it's happening in place of the fabulous Flashback Car Show. It's on the same weekend, which I believe is right around September 15th. It's actually, this year it's September 17th, it says here, and it's only a one-day event. But to get information for that, you can call 462-6789 if you'd like to enter your car. I believe it's pre-1970, but call that number and verify that. I know they're trying to add British classic cars this year, so that's something new that we've never had in Ukiah. Give them a call. Okay, also happening, this is happening over in Lake County, Sunday, July 24th. From 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's in Austin Park. It is a police versus firefighter food fun games, and it says here the music by the band Fog and DJ JMB. They're gonna have a tug of war, a water balloon competition. It's all free admission with even free food, it says here. So make it a day, and it says make Clear Lake great again. That's happening in Austin Park. The July 24th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Okay, and then of course don't forget to join us each and every Tuesday night at Slam Dunk Pizza. It's a family night at Slam Dunk Pizza, which is a family karaoke night hosted by myself, radio's DJ Ken Steely, and my fiancee Anna Scott. and it's from 6:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. All ages are welcome, and we have music for all ages. And with the Ukiah Idol coming up at the Ukiah Fairgrounds, we can get you signed up for that. It's not too late. If you wish to sign up for Ukiah Idol, we can get you in. And yes, you can actually say you know people who know people at the Pizza Baller. And then show up each week before the fair and practice your songs. So that's one of the things that's exciting here in Ukiah. Okay, so I also want to leave this segment by letting you know that we're going to show you, we're going to end this segment with a video that was produced by Cody Stutzman, and the video has rider Kyle Regina practicing for the Hangtown race.